Hello, everyone who is just hopping in. We're gonna get started in just a couple moments, just getting last couple things set up, and we'll get started. So, thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Like sand falling through an hourglass, I'm waiting for you, baby. Patiently, you don't need to rush. Just know I'm counting on you, lady. Here with my arms wide open, I put it out into the universe. You're the only focus for my loving. Like a patient, I need my night nurse. 'Cause you deserve only the best and nothing less, baby. And you're the only woman that I wanna impress, lady. You can have it all. 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 I've been holding all my feelings in, saving the best for you only. Don't have no other interest in those girls that are gonna leave me lonely. I know that we both have options on the why, but what have you really done in no captions? Just you try. Oh, 'cause you deserve only the best and nothing less, baby. You're the only woman that I wanna impress, lady. You can have it all.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Talofa lava, everyone. Welcome to Inner Wellness. Woo! Happy Thursday. Oh my gosh, it's the almost end of October. Where has the year gone? So Inner Wellness is an 8-part series hosted by Green River College's Pono program to center mental health and wellness from a native Hawaiian Pacific Islander lens. You can join us every Thursday from 12 to 1:30 as we explore our inner wellness. So all the folks who are here tuning in to our podcast, as well as to the student union here at our main Auburn campus, welcome. I want to give a special shout out to our sponsors who've made this series possible. Of course, our Pono program, Elevate Healing, New Hope Counseling, and our King County Pacific Islander Task Force. I want to give a special thanks to Voice of the South Pacific, a local island radio station focused on broadcasting the latest in the Pacifica, who have graciously agreed to stream our series for folks to tune in. So thank you so much. Also want to thank our sister NPC institutions who are collaborating with us on this project. So welcome everyone. I'm going to hand it over to Scarlet and Sala for them to introduce ourselves and also talk about today's main topic, what's underneath your anger. So go ahead, Scarlet and Sala.
Thank you, Lonnie. Welcome in, everyone. That was an amazing intro, just welcoming us into this space. Welcome to everyone that's tuning in from the event center and everyone that's tuning in on the Zoom and whatever else platform that you are receiving this from. You could be anywhere, but you are here. You're taking some time to invest in your own inner wellness. And so we don't take that lightly. We truly are thankful for the opportunity and the space to be able to communicate and to be able to like facilitate these conversations with our community. So good afternoon. My name is Sala Afalava. I am a licensed mental health therapist here in Washington. So I work out of my own private practice. I see clients in individual therapy through that way. And I also do a lot of community work around King County and Pierce County area. I partner with Scarlet a lot, amazing colleague to be able to do a lot of these community conversations. Scarlet and I are one of the very, very few, limited few, probably 3, 4, I think now, Samoan mental health therapists in the entire state of Washington. So, we're really excited to be able to do this work and to be in community. But today's conversation, if this is your very, very first time tuning in, I think this is our 1, 2, 3, our fourth conversation now in this series. And wow, it's been really amazing just to be able to like communicate with our community members, hear their own stories, and at the same time, like just talk about these topics regarding mental health. As it pertains to our culture as well, we always try to bring the culture piece in. And so today's conversation is no different. I love this topic. It is what is underneath your anger. And I really, really enjoy how Scarlett is able to just bring that about. It's almost like, anger gets such a bad reputation, just around community. So I really appreciate how Scarlett brings about just a different way of understanding this emotion of anger. And so we're going to go more into that. And it's such an amazing conversation. So again, if you are tuning in for the very first time, welcome. If you have been with us since the beginning, welcome back. Bring your, we always want to like, hey, if you have questions that's related to the topic, let us know. Unmute yourself and just, share your questions, share your feedback, share your experience. If you're in the event center and, we're not able, of course, to like connect with you live, you can always submit your questions to the staff that's there, and with Lonnie, connect with her as well. And we will be able to address those questions maybe in the next community conversation. But welcome in. Let's get started and get going on this conversation on what is underneath your anger. So I'm going to pass it along to my amazing colleague, Scarlett, to introduce herself and get us started.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Sala, man. I so appreciate always being able to do these classes, these community conversations with you. So good afternoon, everyone. I almost said evening because we also do evening classes. So good afternoon, everyone, especially those who are at Green River and at the event center. We truly appreciate our sponsors for continuing to believe in the work that Sala and I do so that we can continue to put out these community conversations. So my name is Scarlet Ekeroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and boundaries coach. I've been in this field for over a decade. Currently work in my private practice, Elevate Healing. Just as Sala, I do the same community work within whatever county brings us in. So it's an absolute joy to have these community conversations. And as we said before in our community conversations, when Sala and I got together, we put together some topics that we thought were very relevant to our communities, because these were topics that would be talked to, whether it was into our office or people in our lives would talk to us personally about these things. And we wanted to bring these private conversations forward so that we could talk about how to do it differently. So again, like Sala said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to engage, because if you've been to our classes before, Sala and I can talk and we will feel it, because we just love having these community conversations, and we love our being transparent. It's just so that you know that yes, we are therapists, and no, we have the same life challenges as most people do, and we work through these challenges as well. So I'm going to go ahead and set myself up, and then Sala, you let me know or think.
And as Scarlett is getting her PowerPoint presentation set up for us today. I also want to make note, if you did join us in our previous community conversations, and maybe there's like a question came up afterwards, feel free to leave it in the chat now. We can address it. Or also, again, like sometimes we'll often leave things like a cheat sheet is what we call it. For every class that we have like sort of like a cheat sheet or some worksheet that is pertaining to that class conversation that we have, and we would always just kind of put it in the chat. So make sure that you're constantly checking the chat for those forms if and when we like share it there.
Awesome. Yeah. So Lay has the form. So Lay, whenever you're ready to share the form, please share it. Again, so we absolutely love talking about what's underneath your anger because, as Sala said, and I totally agree, anger always gets a bad rap, and because it's such a powerful and complex emotion that a lot of times we don't really take the time to truly understand what anger is. We often see anger as the problem, but it's when when we are projecting anger, it's usually something deeper that's going on inside of us. So today we're going to explore those layers of what's underneath the anger, and we're going to try to unveil like what are we protecting, what are we hiding, and how we can address it in a much more healthier and constructive way. So again, just as a reminder, if you have any questions or if you like to share anything, please keep it relevant to today's community conversation. So if you're in the Zoom room, please raise your hand or unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And if you're on social medias, put it in the chat where Sala and the team will be monitoring all chats. So again, we love community conversation and we absolutely love hearing from y'all. So please, I always want to say this, please don't hesitate to share or ask your question because you never know who it may be helping, because it may be helping somebody who's watching now or who watches it later. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to do a review. We're going to talk a review of our last community conversation in regards to feelings. We're going to talk about anger culture. Then we're going to watch a short video on your brain and anger. We really love talking about educating our community on what actually happens within your body when it comes to whatever community conversation we're having. Then we're talking about our brain and our brain's responses, which I call the 4 Fs, and we'll get into that. Then the importance of anger. And as always, we love leaving tips that you all can start using with immediacy. You do not have to wait. You do not have to purchase anything unless you want to do the tips that Sala and I will share on today. So as a review, remember, sharing your feelings are important. It is, I think one of the things that is sometimes understated why feelings are important to share, because as we talked about last time in our classes, research reveals talking about your feelings reduces the intensity and helps with relief. Remember, you can feel up to a combination of 34,000 feelings. So if you don't know how you feel and the answer is I don't know, it's okay. Give yourself time to think about how you are feeling. To remember to use the feelings wheel if you're unable to identify your feelings. Next is, remember, if just because you don't talk about them, they don't disappear. If we don't express them helpfully, it tends to build up. And one of the analogies that I always give a client is that, if we keep stuffing it into our emotional closet, one day there's going to be no more room, and you're unable to close that closet door. And then next is, it helps you, remember, talking about your feelings helps you and others understand you better. Remember to identify your layers of feelings. Remember, it's the most important to identify the root. So we have the surface, the middle layer, and the root. The root feeling is the one that we need to address mostly, because often it is the root feeling that we tend to ignore. Any questions, any comments about this before we go forward?
I think just adding on how, like when you talk about like how stuffing everything in your emotional closet, right? And you're like, one day that closet, if you just keep stuffing clothes in there and shoes, and you just keep putting stuff in there and not taking anything out, one day like that closet is going to burst, right? And I think like I've come across a lot of clients in therapy where they will suppress a lot of emotions and they think it's not coming out, but what they're not aware of is it is seeping out, but it's
Mm-hmm.
showing up in different ways. Like sometimes
Yeah.
for some people, that suppression of emotion comes out in feeling depressed. It comes out
Mm-hmm.
in irritation, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're just short with everybody and they're wondering why they're short with everybody and why they're constantly like, kind of snapping at people. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's coming out, right? It may not
Yeah.
be like a burst of the closet, but
Mm.
it is seeping out in a way,
Yeah.
right? And so I think about that, and I think about the many people that we've had to work with and kind of building that awareness of how, like, you may feel like, because like it's almost like it's become such a norm for people to like, just push it down and keep going,
Yeah.
like let
I
me just
agree.
like keep stuffing it in, and so, and for some people it's like, and I know you'll talk about it later, how it's like such a survival thing, right? Like I can't
Absolutely.
afford to feel this because I need to get up and go to work the next day,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't have the time to feel this. I, as a single mom with kids and whatnot, like I don't have the time or the space to feel this, so it's like
Mm-hmm.
the coming out. But I know you'll like talk more about that later,
Yeah.
but like it's that whole, kind of like idea of I'm push it down, I'm fine, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay, and I'm just gonna keep pushing forward.
For sure. And I love that you gave that example because I shared with it last week. So one of the ways it came out for me was I was a emotional eater and didn't even realize I was eating my emotions. I'm just like, oh, just let me just keep eating and keep eating. And then it eventually, when I went to see the doctor, did not go well. Okay. So I think that's the thing. So another way that it can come out is you're not sleeping. Like you can't think. Everything is unclear. So those are other ways that it can come out. So that's why we're talking about it's a buildup. And I love what Sala said. It's not just this bursting out. No, it can show up in little ways. It can show up in how you interact. It can show how you interact with yourself, how you think. How are you able to think clearly? Are you able to have a conversation without constantly being distracted? So those are some small ways that it can come out. We just have to make sure that we pay attention to those things. So any questions, any comments before we go forward? Good. Cool. All right. I love talking about culture, especially being a Samoan woman. I love just talking about culture because it is such a part of who we are. And a lot of times we don't talk about the impact of culture that it has on us just in totality. So my question to you all are, what are some ways you've learned to manage or express anger? And of course, y'all know I will share mine. Sala, how about you start us out and then give some people some time to think?
hmm I think before, because obviously now as a therapist, you know, obviously now as a therapist, I have all these tools in my toolbox to be able to manage, and be able to like, cope with my emotions and things like that. But I think before I, knew how to, cope or manage my emotions, it was all about suppression.
Mm-hmm.
I just, it didn't, we talked about in one of our previous conversations how sometimes when like within our cultures and our community, it we're more so like in that role of being seen and not heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even when it
Yeah.
comes to our emotions, right? And I think we did mention it in one of our previous conversations where it was almost like as a kid growing up, it was not okay for you to express your feelings, or if you feel some type of way about something, like you're not just going to speak out to your parents
Mm-hmm.
about it. You'd
Oh
be
yeah.
you'd be very, very careful with your words. Like you don't just like, well, I'm expressing anger to my, because it would be considered disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
Even just speaking out to your adult about I mean, like about speaking out to your parents about something, right? That's concerns, like,
Yeah.
mom, I feel very, frustrated about this. I'm like, for a what? It's like, no, it's like none of that, so
Mm-hmm.
I think like in my experience growing up, it was more so a lot of it was suppressed, and just
Yeah.
kind of like what I talked about earlier. It was like just stuff it in and keep moving forward, stuff it in
Mm-hmm.
and keep moving forward. And I think over time we've just, kind of learned different ways to try and make it work, but it was seeping out in other ways. It definitely affected my
Yeah,
friendships, my relationships, and things like that, you know?
for sure.
Hmm.
Anybody else?
I can go.
Go
Um,
ahead, Lay.
I think for me, like ways that I've like learned to manage or express my anger is like channeling it to like something else, like
Mm,
unrelated to like what my anger is about. So it could be like channeling it through sports or like using that energy to like for like sports or like hobbies or activities that I'm a part of.
mm,
Um, but like still I still feel that like that unresolved like
mm,
yeah.
yeah. Celia, are you going to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna answer the question too. I mean, I'm like any other person, right? I had the classic response of just pushing it down, right? Pushing
Mm,
it down until somebody else got the reaction of how I felt. But it wasn't just about that person, right? It was just about everything
mm,
else. It's like push it down. But I feel like that's everybody's, or a lot of folks. Don't want to generalize. A lot of folks that I know
yeah.
who are in my circle. That's how we do it. Just push it down, save it for another day.
No, that's good. I think that's what we end up doing a lot of. And so my hope for this class is this community conversation is to really delve into how we can do it differently because um, there are so many things that are unaddressed when it comes to when we initially just put out anger. Does anybody else want to share before I share? Okay. So if you still want to share after I share, please share. So for me, before therapy, before becoming a therapist and finding out how I can actually do it differently. The unfortunate thing is what I learned as I was growing up that it was only okay for adults to be angry, and particularly it was only okay for adult males to be angry, and that if a female expressed anger, it was often met with either verbal or physical hostility. So what I learned was, just as me being a woman and growing up as a young girl, that I learned that I learned to be silent when I was angry, so again suppressing that anger. And then I learned that which was interesting, I also learned that anger was praised and safe for men to do, but not for a woman. And so those are the things I learned in regards to, just being a Samoan woman, just being in the culture that I grew up in, that it was okay for adults, but in particular, it was only okay for males to express their anger. So, and then there was this. So then what I learned was the power and privilege of anger. So that for men, it was manly and masculine, that it was okay if they acted out in physical aggression, because it was often chucked up to, oh man, that's just boys being boys or men being men. But if a woman did it, it was not encouraged, it was unpleasant, it was unfeminine. And then what ended up happening was, which the way I ended up being how I projected anger was, I was very passive aggressive. So that's what ends up happening. We tend to be more passive aggressive, and we become uncomfortable with anger. And so I will share my anger story, one of my anger stories, as the class goes on. But those were the things that I learned in regards to the difference between anger, that there was a power difference, that it was for men it was okay, and then for women that it was not okay. And then, with anger culture, we always have to talk about the East versus West, because we are, of course, Eastern concepts. It's the group where everything is about, represents the family, the community, or the system that we are part of, versus the individual, which is more Western culture, which is just, Europe, USA. And they talked about, you have to put yourself first in this. And so often what happens within the Eastern cultures, being in this field for over a decade, is that we often tend to put, again, the community and the system before us, family before us. And what ends up happening is the individual ends up suffering a lot in silence. So again, like we're in Western culture, you're encouraged to be an individual, to express your feelings or your emotions. And then lastly is anger can be used positively and not only negatively. And we will get into, as we go throughout this presentation or this conversation, you will see what I'm referring to of how anger can be used positively. Sala, anything else you wanted to add? Any other questions or comments anybody else want to add as well?
Nope, you good.
Cool. So yeah, so those I love talking about the impact of culture because again, it is imperative that, because one of the things that I really always want to be adamant about is that we don't hide what actually is unhealthy within our culture, that we actually talk about these things, because again, we see these things and these people and the people who come to us talk about this in our offices. All right, so we're gonna watch a short video. Again, we love talking about this is actually how anger and the brain works together, and then we will have a short conversation about it post video. And then Sala, let me know if we're good.
Anger, like fire, can be good at times, but it can also destroy the longer we hold on to it, ravaging relationships and lives. Why do we have it? And why is its grip so powerful? Hi, I'm Peter Montoya from Thrive Union, and I'll be sharing our current thinking on anger as part of our How the Brain Works series. Anger developed to help us react quickly to protect ourselves. It arises primarily from an ancient portion of our brain called the amygdala, which triggers automatic responses when we're threatened, commonly known as fight, flight, or freeze. When distinguishing a threat, the amygdala activates the hypothalamus, which tells our pituitary glands to release the hormones like the stress chemical cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. Before we're even aware, our body is flooded with hormones and neurotransmitters that shoot up our heart rate, energize our muscles, and increase blood pressure, all to get us ready to fight. Systems like digestion and vision are limited, along with our prefrontal cortex, which controls reasoning. Our hippocampus quiets, reducing short-term memory and new memory formation. All this makes us impulsive decision makers who may say harsh words we don't remember after the fact. These reactions helped our ancestors survive wild animal attacks, but the long-term effects ravage our modern bodies. Too much anger compromises our brains and creates high blood pressure, heart disease, and compromised immune systems. Worse, the amygdala has trouble distinguishing modern slights from imaginary threats. So how do we manage our anger? Brain scans of murder show damaged or less active prefrontal cortexes, showing that one key way to combat anger is to strengthen that area. But can you grow gray matter? Yes. Research shows that meditation has been shown to both shrink the amygdala and grow the prefrontal cortex. Research also shows that venting or suppressing anger actually builds it. Instead, mindfully observe your feelings or try reframing them. Imagine learning that the driver who cut you off just lost their child. Your anger would likely immediately turn into compassion. Our imagination can trigger the amygdala or quiet it. Try creating stories that reframe an offender's actions when there is no real threat. And don't forget meditation. Meditation is by far and away the best practice for reducing all recurring negative emotions. Changing how we approach our anger literally changes our brains. It frees us from the tyranny of automatic responses and helps us enjoy greater health, longevity, and fulfillment so we can thrive.
Thrive you.
All right. Any questions? Sala, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I always say that with anger, it's one of those emotions that get a really bad reputation. And it's because, like, I think when people see it, they usually see it in people that, like, in the behavioral ways that people express anger, like throwing something across the room or yelling really loud at someone. And so it gets a really bad reputation among the emotions, but it really, all it is it's just another emotion. But it's, it just gets a really, really bad reputation. What I like about this video is how it talks about how this emotion of anger, like, it was there from the beginning, and it really helped us and continues to help us to survive. Really, it just helps us to survive, and it's part of our survival instincts. Whenever we're in danger, like, that emotion can really help us to be able to, like, defeat whatever it is that is we're feeling threatened by. And so I also like that it pointed out how, however, if we stay in that emotion for a long period of time, it can be really detrimental to the person. So it's like, it's not something that we're meant to stay in it for a long time. And so if we have a lot of, emotions like anger, we're just keeping it, kind of bottled up or stuffing in our emotional closet and we're not letting it out. It's really releasing a lot of these, chemicals, a lot of these neurotransmitters that it's talking about in the video. That is not good for us, so I think those are just some of the things I really stood out to me about the video. There's a lot more, but I want to give space to people to share as well.
Does anyone want to add anything to what Sala is saying about the video? And then Sala, let me know if the chats were good. So while you all think, I love how it talks about, again, what happens to the brain when we suppress. And so what ends up happening is it's this front part of our brain. It's our decision maker. It's called the prefrontal cortex, and this is where we have our decision making. And when anger comes, because we detect or perceive a danger, it goes offline. And so one of the first things that we do is our blood rushes. And so this is why when I work with individuals who have challenges with anger, one of the first things that I always talk about them was to how to slow down their breathing. Because one of the first things that we stop doing when we become angry is we don't breathe normally. So what that ends up doing is it sends a signal to our brain, something's wrong, you're in danger, take care of it. So that's why we say we have to slow the body down. We have to get our breathing back on normally so that we can turn back on our decision maker. And so, because when this goes offline, there's a plenty of things that happen. And then the back part of our brain, which is what it says, the amygdala, which is the emotional part of our brain, that tends to take over when we actually need the decision maker to take over. So one of the things about, even when I tell kids, when I used to work with kids and young kids, when I point out the decision maker, I said, this is why it's in the front of the brain, because that's the first thing that we have to go to, not what's in the back. They're like, oh, okay. So this is why I still tell clients that I say the reason it's in the front, because this is the first thing that we have to use in order to us to make a clear decision so that we don't make poor choices. Any questions, any comments before we go further? Good. All right. All right, so here are our body's responses to what happens, our brain's responses, what happens when anger does arise. Then, so this is just kind of a repeat of what the video just said. So it's called the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn response. So what is it? It is our brain's preparation and protection for a physical response. Trauma usually impacts how you respond. So come not next week, but the week after when we talk about trauma. So there are the 4 types. So the first one is our flight response, which is our body's urge to run from danger. So sometimes, so here are some typical responses that you can have when we're in a flight response. So we can feel fidgety, feel tense, we can feel anxiety, we can have some nervous sweating. You can feel numbness in your arms or any part of your extremities. You can feel trapped. You can feel restless. So those again are some symptoms that you may display in a flight response. So again, flight is your body's urge to run from danger. Next is our fight response. So it's reacting to a perceived threat with aggression or assertive action to defend oneself. So for example, this can be a tight jaw, grinding teeth, clenching of your fists. You want to attack the danger physically. I love this one. You can cry in anger. You have an increased heart rate. You have increased blood pressure, muscle tension. And then you have rapid and shallow breathing. So those are our those are typical ways that you can be in fight response. So again, it's reacting to a perceived threat with aggression or assertive action to defend oneself. Next is our freeze response. So it's the body's inability to move or act against a threat. So you really just freeze, you don't move. So there's a sense of dread that may happen. You may feel stiff, you may feel heavy, cold, or numb, and our heart rate is typically decreased when we're in the freeze stage. And then our last stage is our fawn response. So these are typically my people pleasers because they want to avoid all conflict with anybody. So usually, typically, we are either in over agreement. We try to be overly helpful, even at the detriment of your physical health or mental health. And then sometimes our primary, and most often our primary concern is to make someone else happy when we are in our fawn response. So remember, you don't have to feel one at each time. You can actually go from fawn to flight to fight to freeze. And so I don't want you to think because okay, I'm in flight right now, I can't go to freeze. No, it just whatever is the body's natural response to whatever the perceived threat is. So again, these are the brain's preparation so that you can feel protected and again, trauma always impacts how you respond to something. Sala, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, there's a question. Is it
Yes.
possible to train yourself? Is it possible for a person to train themselves to respond in a certain way, like the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn?
Um, I think there's so much underneath that. And the reason why I say that, because for me as a therapist, I would have to know your history. And so it would have to be us talking through like what is it that how are you wanting to respond, because whatever the situation presents, each it has a different response for each thing. So I don't want to say yes. I would just want to say there's more to unpack with that in order for me to say yes or no, because there's a whole history that we have to get through. Because a lot of what I do when I work with my clients, we get to the root of why we do something, and not because my goal for my clients, I always say to them, I go, my job is not to get rid of your symptoms, it's to help you manage your symptoms. And so we have to get to the root of the reason why you're doing something a certain way so that we can present something or how to do it differently. So hopefully that answers your question, Sal. If you want to add into that, let me know. And whoever wrote that's a good question though. And if hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, a good question. I would say yes, as well. Because like for example, I think about like, um, I think about like in situations where maybe like every time before you take a test, right? Let's say you're about to take an exam as a student. Every time you're about to take a test, you just freeze up, for whatever reason. Maybe your experience is, you just have a lot of test anxiety. So you just cannot, every time you're about to take a test, you're like, I can't, you just freeze up and you're not able to sit down and complete that test, right? And so I think like, and the reason why I say yes is because if this is like your, just natural response for whatever your experience may be, you can actually, in working with the professional, you can actually train or retrain yourself in being able to like respond in a different way so that that freeze response doesn't continue to impact you or affect you in taking your test, right? So this is actually what, therapists are working on with clients as well. So and so it would be like, for example, an example of that would be like an exposure therapy in doing that,
Yeah.
right? So it's like slowly exposing you to your anxiety around test taking, and then increasing your tolerance on being able to, in that situation of taking a test. And the more that you're exposed to it, it's almost like, well, then there comes that desensitization piece, right? So then so yes, I would say yes, you can change your response if like for whatever reason, because sometimes people just kind of either respond in either of these different ways, for maybe from their own experiences, their history, their experiences, or it's just like a natural way they just like kind of respond in. But yes, you can change your response if these things are impacting you.
Yeah, so I'll just give a personal example. So thanks for sharing that, Sala. So probably when I was a younger, probably say from 10 to probably 15, I was in a fight response all the time because everybody was a danger to me. So that's just what happened. And so I would tend to yell and scream or hit. And it wasn't until I actually had a teammate of mine say, like, check me. And it was just like, oh, okay, so maybe I shouldn't do that. So then I had to learn how to do it differently so that I wasn't in that fight response all the time. And so like, and so that's one way that yes, you can learn it. And so that's why I'm saying each situation is different. It just and then for what we do, it's just we have to get to the root of what something is going on so that we can change it. So that if it happens to come up again, that we don't respond the same way. So those are some that's how, just continue to answer that. Go ahead, Sala.
I want to give another example of like in relationships, right? Everybody in college, everybody is like away from home for the first time, maybe. So it's like everybody's in relationships. So sometimes what this looks like in relationship is maybe, and all throughout like your dating experience or whatever, you've had like such a really bad experience, whatever that looks like, and it's affected you in a lot of ways. And so now you meet someone and you're in a relationship with them, and you start to see maybe similar things in this person, maybe, and you could recognize it from like, your previous relationship or something. And your first go-to would probably be like self-sabotaging that relationship, right? So it could be like, ooh, so actually, and that can look, so we call it like, okay, I'm self-sabotaging this relationship. That's flight. That is you taking off. That is you, instead of like, maybe how do you work through some of these things, even though that maybe this is going to be a good relationship, but you don't know that because all you're seeing is like, oh, I see some red flags. Okay, bam, I'm a bounce. I'm out, and like you're out already. And that continues. And you're like, I don't know. I don't know why this relationship isn't working, but it's like, come to find out. And I'm sharing these stories because these are all familiar things that like I've had to work through with clients as well. So what may look and feel like, you self-sabotaging in a relationship is you taking flight. That's you leaving without having to like, what does it look like for you to work through these things in a relationship if it's really hard things to work through, right? And so I've had clients come in where, like there's a lot of trust issues, there's a lot of things like that. So, and it shows up. So flight, fight, freeze, or fawn, it just looks different. It can look different in relationship. It can look different in a physical manner, and things like that. So that's just another example of like what flight, fight, freeze, or fawn can look like.
For sure. No, that's a good example because one of my clients, I remember we had to talk about, is this actually a danger or are you uncomfortable? Because everything that was perceived as a danger, she would go to one of these responses. And so then when we were able to actually work on telling her brain that this is not dangerous, this is actually her being uncomfortable, that's when she was able to have a different response in regards to whatever the situation that she had presented in session. So any questions, any further comments? A good question, whoever asked that question. Hopefully that was helpful. If not, let us know. We'll continue sharing more if needed. Good. All right. So here's some common anger triggers that I wanted to bring up that can, literally can happen. So here are some internal ones. A lot of the internal ones, of course, is all reflection of self, of what's going on inside of us. So we can feel invalidated, unmet expectations, personal insecurities, feelings of disrespect, and some external common anger triggers that we can have is traffic or delays. I've gotten better in traffic. I would just like to report that. So, or you can have conflicts with others, with friends or colleagues, and there can be a perceived unfairness or injustice. So again, these are just some common anger triggers. This is, again, just some examples. This is not an exhaustive list. Everybody's anger triggers are different. And so I know in previous classes before, we've talked about how traffic can cause some anger. That's why I said I've gotten better at it. So I have just learned to just go with the flow. So, anybody want to share any that they have, or anybody want to ask a question before we press forward?
Question.
Question, go
Yeah.
ahead.
How can someone identify their specific anger triggers if they're not immediately aware of it, or it's like obvious?
So I'll say this. So if you're sitting in front of me and you say if you're not aware of it, part of what I would say to you is just like, let's not avoid it. And so let's actually sit and think about, because that's what we talked about a little bit earlier, was just like, we don't give ourselves enough time to think about actually what is bothering us. And so if we don't sit and think about what is actually bothering us, we just keep going and we just keep pushing it to the back, not really saying, okay, what is it this person or something did that bothers me? I got to identify that, because I know this feeling and I don't really like this familiar feeling. Because that's the thing, when something makes us angry and it's the same thing, it's it's something that's familiar to us. So that's why we have the same response to it. And so that's why we have to sit with it and think about what is actually going on with me. Why do I keep acting this way? Why, when I'm around this certain person, that they can just trigger me like that? What is it about them that bothers me? So we have to give ourselves space and time to think about it and not avoid it or not deflect and saying like, oh man, it's just such and such, or this is just, it happened to me again. I got angry again. So you got to give yourself space and time to think about what is actually going on with you. So that's how I would answer that. Sala, what would you answer? How would you answer that?
No, that was awesome. I think like one thing that I know that you and I always talk about with this conversation is how anger is a secondary emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say that anger is a secondary emotion, that means, and a lot of people like think that they just get angry just like that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I bet you that like there's a whole bunch of other emotions you experienced leading up
Mm-hmm.
to it, right? So I know we always talked about how anger is like a secondary emotion and stuff, so it builds up. So I think the question was like on how do you identify it if you're not like aware of it. I think Scarlett's going to talk more about how you can identify those, I think,
Mm-hmm.
triggers as well, like leading up to it, right? We're not just immediately angry, we're just like, maybe you were irritated throughout
Mm-hmm.
the day. Maybe, the whole week you were feeling, irritated. You went to work, you were irritated. That wasn't resolved, and you come home and it's like the kids are crying, food is not cooked, you got to clean up, and now you're frustrated that things aren't done. So again,
Mm-hmm.
that's the buildup, right? So I
Yep.
think if you're one thing I know we work on with clients in therapy is identifying those emotions or those feelings underneath
Yep.
before it gets to the anger. I
Anger.
think Scarlett is gonna go over
Yeah.
that later. I don't want to give it away.
Yeah. Go ahead, Una.
Yeah, hello, Sala and Scarlett. Thank you for the
Hello, it's
opportunity.
Sylvia.
I was just looking at the triggers, and sometimes I get emotions, and there's someone, it's like more, it's my relative, but she always like have something like very, I could say like, I feel like every time she has a comment, I feel it's, very negative or,
Mm-hmm.
down. Uh, you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, it's, I don't feel good, every time she says something, I feel like that she's putting, that's just how I interpret it. She's putting me down. There's a lot of people I always so grateful. They always like very
Mm-hmm.
uplifting. But this person
Mm-hmm.
here, it's always all the time. What can I do? So I'm just asking, shall I take some time and talk to her, or what will be a solution for that?
Well, I think you just said the solution, honestly, Auntie Sylvia. You said take some time to think about what to say to her. That's you giving yourself the space, and because it's not, it's thinking about like, what is it that the behavior that she's doing that's bothering you, and saying, and how do we say that, and or just asking and say, hey, so I noticed when we've interacted, I've noticed that you say whatever their behavior is, just want to check in to see if you're okay, is something going on. So those are some examples that you can do that. But again, it's just really, like you just said, giving yourself the time and space to think about what it is that this person is doing, and what is it that they're actually doing that bothers me. Is that helpful?
Yes, because sometimes I feel vulnerable,
Okay.
like she always say that,
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And she was just like a person, like with highly educated,
Mm-hmm.
but I was surprised, when she always put that, and I just feel maybe she like to do that because I swallowed it and I take it. So, and I thought maybe I would take some time to talk to her and tell her how it hurt my feelings. Or,
For sure. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And so, because a lot of times people don't know what their behaviors are unless you say something. And so, and that's the thing that I want to, that's why we talked about knowing your feelings, now what's underneath your anger, so that we can identify actually what is going on within me so that I can share it with somebody. Because again, if I do something to Sala and it hurt her and I don't know that, I just don't know. But as she tells me, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, you're right. There's a repair that can happen. But if it's the continuation, because a lot of times people just don't know how they're behaving. And so you have to be able to bring attention to it. Once it's addressed and they still decide to stay the same way, then you have the decision of what you want to do now. That doesn't, and if you still want to interact, that doesn't mean that you have to do the fullness of what is. You get to decide how you want to interact or engage in that relationship. So again, it's the power. This is all that we ever want to talk about, is how we can continue to empower our community for themselves. Like, this is all about self-empowerment, self-awareness, so that you can continue to do better for you. Go ahead, Auntie Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Latu. I'm the
Co-host.
other co-host, and I've been
Hi, Latu.
enjoying this, especially as a Pacific Islander point of view, bringing in with anger. I just like to address, you mentioned earlier about anger can be used positively and not negatively, and I think this is a site where a lot of us adults in the Polynesian families, especially parents, we tend to take the role and we keep telling it, because I grew up listening to that. My parents would counsel me and they would say, we are only doing this like tough love. And the counseling or the anger becomes so extreme that you kind of feel that they're addressing this because they want you to succeed, but at the same time, the frustration and the sadness kicks in to me being victimized. And now, when I grew up as a teenager, I keep telling myself, okay, I'd rather just get a spanking than to hear these anger, lectures all the time. So I took that. It says positively. So if you're a student going to school, I would try harder, because I'd rather do well and excel than to have my parents' anger, or because you can't tell them that they can't tell you. As a Polynesian parents, you just respect them. You don't look at them, you look down, because sometimes if you look straight in their eyes, they think you're challenging. And if you cry, you get even more lecture. So you don't know where to stop as a teenager. So when I became a parent myself, I keep remembering that and trying to implement the things that I want my kids not. And sometimes I would say that. You have no idea, because I don't use the laying of hands, or I just use the tough, not tough love, but plenty of lectures, but in a nicer way, giving example. So I just want to say, maybe that's what Fatima probably needs to speak up. But again, it's that part of how she was brought up. You can't really tell
For
that
sure.
person. But I think we live in a century where we have to address the fact that, hello, we listen, and
Yeah.
you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this so like I said, when I work with my Pacific Island clients, one of the things that we end up talking about is actually, what is the definition of respect? Me telling you that you're hurting me is not disrespectful. Now, how you say it and what you do, that can be viewed as disrespectful, which we'll talk about more as well. And so I think the unfortunate thing, sometimes we are brought up to unhealthily fear our parents, because there is such thing as a healthy fear, in my opinion. And so because even when I work with Pacific Island families, we talk about really like it's okay to guide and whatever you need to do for your children. I said, but if you hurt their feelings, we also have to talk about repair, that there's typically not enough repair that's going on. So, for example, I'll give an example. I have a child, and like I know when I had said something mean to him, I had to go to him. I'm like, you know what? I was mean. That was uncalled for. That here's what I'm going to do differently the next time, because you have to have a course of action to do it differently so that they could still feel safe coming to you, because that's my goal for my child, for always for him to feel safe coming to me no matter what the situation is, no matter what mood I'm in. And so because I had to learn how to repair, because I'm not sure that's really taught amongst as we were growing up, like the importance of repair when it comes to disciplining your child. Because of course it's completely understandable that they say they do it out of love, they want you to do better, but a lot of times what's missing is in that, because all they see is them being hurt, like where you would feel hurt, is the repair part of what's going on.
Yeah.
Any comments on that? Any questions? And Sala, if you want to add anything, please do.
Just want to go back to Auntie Sylvia's sharing about what she had shared. I think what I was thinking about was how we also talk a lot about how our feelings are like they're just like little notifications for us, right? So whenever we're feeling some type of way, it's like our body's way of notifying you that, hey, you need to pay more attention to this,
For sure.
or hey, this doesn't sit well with me. Right. So think about our feelings. A lot of people are very averse of the feelings. Like, I don't want to feel my feelings. But all it is our feelings are like little notifications that lets you know, hey, something's coming up. Hey, this person is bothering you. Hey, what this person said, I don't really like it. So if like I think about Auntie Sylvia's situation, where if you say someone is, the way that they talk to you leaves you feeling some type of way about it. It makes you, maybe how they talk to you is condescending. Maybe how they talk to you is disrespectful. And it's leaving you every time you leave a conversation with this person, you feel, you just feel like you just don't feel good. You just like, wait, what? What just happened? And so if you feel that way, whatever it is that you're feeling, I would say take it as your body's way of telling you, this doesn't sit right with you. I need to address this. This is what needs to happen. That did not feel well. I do not like that when this person said this about you, or said this in this way. So that's what it is. That's what's happening, is when you shared what you were talking about, all I could think of is, wow, your instincts, your feelings are telling you, okay, I don't like how this person talked to me. And that's okay. Because sometimes, like you said, we're so prone to just kind of, let's just, stuff it in. Let's just, and not because it might be disrespectful, and we always want to be nice. Samoans are usually known as the happy people, so it's almost like we got to be happy people all the time, and we can't give off any other feelings. But it's like, it's okay. It's your body's way of letting you know that you are not okay with this. You're not okay with what this person said. And then I want to just share a little bit with adding to what Anselatu was saying too, about anger being used in a positive way. And I think, like, whenever I think or I hear how anger can be used in a positive way, right, I think about social justice, right? So you think about any issue that's going on, any injustice in our communities, and that gets you just so angry that this happened, right? So that anger, we want to use that anger in a constructive way, not a destructive way. What's a constructive way? And sometimes, like, that feeling or that emotion of anger, we can use it in a destructive way, by like, it can motivate us to maybe advocate for change. It can motivate us to rally. It can motivate us to protest. It can motivate us to, because of that anger that's stirred up, because something does not sit right with you, right? So that's always an example I go to, as far as like, being able to like use that emotion, anger, in a positive way and not in a destructive way. Like I'm just going to go and do something to this person like right now that's going to bring them bodily harm or something, right? So that would be a destructive way to express your anger. But think more so, and also what we do a lot in therapy is helping people find out how they're able to express their anger, or teach them how to express anger in a constructive way.
For sure. No, that's good. Any other questions, comments, and let me know if we're good in the chat, Sala. Good. All right. So anger is important, like Sala was saying. So one of the biggest reasons is anger is a protector. It is, like Sala said, it always gets a bad reputation, but it's a natural emotion that we have. And so a lot of, if we think about our ancestors, a lot of the anger was a survival tactic because of the times that they were living in. So it was necessary to use anger to survive whatever that was going on at the time. So we're talking about wars, famine, civil wars, world wars. So those were appropriate for those times. So I because anger again is in this sense, and what we're talking about, it is important because it is a protector. It reminds us that something's going on with us physically. Our values are being devalued, or there's an injustice, or it protects our beliefs, our emotions, mental and spiritual, emotional, and protects our soul. So again, it is important. Anger is an important emotion. It is a natural part of who we are. Because one of the things I said, I'm not here to get rid of your anger. I'm just here to help you manage it so you could use it at the appropriate time. So again, there's nothing wrong with anger. Secondly is, again, makes you aware of an injustice. It informs a boundary. Come to our boundaries class, a boundary was violated. So Auntie Sylvia, like you were saying, when something doesn't feel right, a boundary was violated within you. And you have to sit and like, what boundary was it violated? Okay, there's an injustice that happened. This is why I feel unsettled when I talk to her. What is that? So again, that's because that's what's going on. That's that root feeling. Again, this is why it's important to identify the root feeling of what is going on with you, because often it's the root feeling that we ignore. So again, it helps you make you aware of an injustice and informs you again that a boundary was violated. And then again, just like Auntie Lassie was saying, it helps us motivate us to solve and drive towards goals. So like she was doing better, doing well in school. So again, it is a motivator. So again, anger is an important emotion because it is naturally a part of who we are. But too much anger can negatively impact the body. So some physical responses that you can have, like for example, chest tightness, uncomfortable feeling your stomach, rapid heartbeat, just like in the fight or flight responses. Some emotional responses that you can have increased anxiety, high blood pressure, headaches. I used to get headaches, heart disease, chronic stress, which can also lead to inflammation, and some behavioral responses that you can have when it's too much anger and how it impacts the body negatively, that you can be yelling, withdrawing. I always want to say a lot of times I don't think people pay enough attention to withdrawing, especially if you have an unhealthy amount of anger. And then you can isolate as well or have passive aggressiveness. So this is why we say anger is a positive and not only a negative emotion, because it is our protector. It makes us aware of an injustice and it helps motivate us to solve or drive towards a goal. Comments, questions? And Sala, if you wanted to add anything. Good. Okay.
Good to go.
So again, good. All right. Anger's not the problem. I'm going to keep saying it. Anger is not the problem. It's the negative behavior that you do when you're angry. That is what essentially is viewed negatively. Because again, anger is a buildup of a root emotion that we ignore. Again, anger is a buildup of a root emotion that we ignore. So for example, if I feel unheard and that keeps happening over and over and over again, at some point I will let it come to the surface, which is our surface feeling, and I will portray anger in a negative way, which I may yell or hit something or throw something. So that's this the behavior of throwing something, the behavior of yelling that essentially is viewed negatively. So again, anger is a secondary emotion because again, I mean, even another root feeling that we can possibly feel is feeling rejected, or there could be grief, or we can feel overwhelmed. So those are some root feelings that we have to address. And that's not saying that you can't be angry. That's what none of this is saying. It's just we have to address what's underneath that. Why? What's the reason I keep feeling angry? What am I not addressing underneath all of that? Any questions? Comments? Good? Okay. I'm gonna share my anger story. So I love sharing the story because a lot of times when I share with my clients when it's deemed important to share with them, they're always like, "What, really?" So if you see on my hand, I'll show right here, you see those 2 scars right there. So I had hand surgery. I was in college. I was on the track and field team, and my team was in I was a thrower, and we were in a disarray, and there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of arguments. There was long team meetings about trying to get our camaraderie together. It was just not happening at all. So it was my senior year, and we were just got out of a tension filled team meeting. It was just the throwers only, and tensions were super super high. A teammate confronted me about something that was untrue, and I just remember looking at her and being like, what is happening right now? As soon as she was done, I did really good in restraining myself. Went over to call a teammate, and I said, "I don't know where you're at, but you need to get here now before I hurt somebody." And she's like begging me, "Scarlet, please don't do anything. Please don't do it." And I said, "You need to get here now." Saw another one of my teammates, because there was like 10 of us. Saw another one of my teammates, and I told her, I said, "You better keep her away from me." And I ended up in rage. I blacked out and rage, punching a brick wall. What happened was I was so full of adrenaline, I didn't even realize that I had broken my bones, or they were shattered more than anything. And it took uh, my strength coach, my teammate, and my position coach to come and get me, because they were like, "Hey, Scarlett, you need to go to the trainer. Your hand is broken." I'm like, "No, it's not. Like, no, it's not. Leave me alone. No, it's not." Because I was walking away from the facility, and they were just like, "Look at your hand." And it took them they had to convince me to look at my hand. And now my hand is like a softball size of an injury. These fingers were down here, like half of the finger. And I was like mortified. And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I do? What just happened?" And I remember being like, "There goes my season. Like, there goes my season. Like, it's my senior season. I was, tacked to be to go to nationals for the first time ever, and it all went out the door. It all went out the door." And what ended up happening was, like, I had to really recognize, man, I got a lot of pent up anger. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm keeping in, and I'm so grateful. God, I'm so thankful to God that I did not punch my teammate, because I don't think I would be in public. I wouldn't be in public. I most likely would be in prison, because I have a feeling it would have been a detriment to her. Because and the wild thing about it was, all the other teammates, like the runners and sprinters and jumpers who were in there, they said they heard my bones crack. And I was like, they were like, "You didn't hear it?" I said, "I heard nothing." So that's when I recognized, man, I got to really work on my anger so that this doesn't keep happening. Because what ended up, the result of that, I had to have surgery, had to have, they had to put pins in my hands to connect the bones back together. And the thing I didn't like was that my teammate who upset me, who I got upset at, was scared of me. And I did not like that feeling at all. And so I ended up going to her like, "Hey, it's done. It's over. It's okay. Let's move forward." And she started crying because she would avoid me in practice. And I just was like, no, it's done. It's okay. Like it's all, well, it's all forgiven. And what's interesting, like there were so many people who said, oh man, you should have hit her. And I'm like, nah, that wouldn't have been good. This is just, that's not what that is. And so I had to learn that I had to really work on not holding in everything that was going on within me. Like I had to learn to do it differently, because like I said, for me to black out and not even remember like punching, and people had to convince me, that's how anger is. People had to convince me to go get help, and I'm like, no, I'm fine, leave me alone. And then when they convinced me, I was like, oh crap, like what just, it was like the reality came back in, like what did I just do? So I wanted to share that story of transparency, that anger can take over you, and in a negative way. And I had to recognize that, man, I got to do some work. I absolutely have to do some work, and so that I can do differently. So go ahead, Auntie Latu or Auntie Sylvia.
Yes, one of the listeners, if I could share their comment as well.
Please do. Yeah.
It's from Ui Mayama Lausiva, who commented, anger can also be from a trauma response from childhood abuse, emotional, mental, and
For sure.
psychological, especially culturally
For sure.
in the Samoan household. And also Polynesian, I add to that. But that was the comment.
Yeah. And so that's what, no, it's a good comment. And, that's why we wanted to have this conversation, that because regardless, though things may have happened to us, we have to learn how to manage it, so that we can do differently, not for anybody else, but for ourselves, in general. So this is why I don't ever mind sharing whatever topic we have, a story that I have, and I know Sala shares as well, because what we want to say, that it can be done differently, but you've got to do the work to do it differently. So like when I was angry, when I realized I was angry, man, I was just like, I can't keep living like this. This is unhealthy. This is not okay, because I can't keep having surgeries. Like for me to take myself out of the running and to literally squash my season. And I never blamed my teammate. I was just like, that was the decision I made. I'm just glad I didn't punch her, because like I said, I would not be in public. I most likely would definitely be in prison somewhere, because I'm not sure she would have survived. I thank God I really did not hit my teammate, because that was the thing. I had to take responsible for my behaviors, and like I said, that's why I was like, I have to do this differently. I cannot do it like this anymore. I cannot keep withholding how I feel about something. And then as the years went on, I learned to do it in a better and a constructive way.
Thank you for
Go ahead,
sharing your
Sala.
story, your anger story, Scarlett. I swear, every time that Scarlett shares her anger story, it's just, I never tire of hearing it, and it's always powerful every single time. So as you can see, even as therapists, we are very transparent with our own experiences, because we believe that in sharing our stories, I mean, that's just what we do as a culture, as a community, is we connect
For
by
sure.
sharing our stories. And we sort of remove that boundary of like, okay, look, we're not like here and our community is here. It's like, no, we know that this is how we connect with our community, is through sharing of our own stories as well. Scarlett, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about, because in this conversation we've talked about how anger is a secondary emotion, right? And how you can experience a whole bunch of other things, other emotions leading up to that moment, so that it builds up. So I was wondering if
Sure.
you can share with everyone, was there any other emotions that was going on? Like what was happening, then? What were you feeling leading up to that moment?
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of, so at that time, so a couple of things were going on. I was my senior year, so that means I was graduating. So that means finishing up whatever it is for the school year, so that I can graduate. There was also like the plans of, what am I going to do after I graduate, as we all have that, especially coming from undergrad. There was also some tensions that were going on within friends, that became very heavily to where I had to get involved, or actually I should say I chose to get involved, which I shouldn't have. And then there was a tension at home. There was a lot of tension within my family that was impacting me. And so when I would try to ignore it, it didn't go well, because nothing was being addressed. And so there was a divide that was going on that was causing a huge rift. And there's this, of course, as the oldest girl, so I'm the second oldest, but the oldest girl, there's this responsibility that you feel that you have to keep everybody together. And then there was a lot of like tension also between teammates, within my group that was impacting me as well. And so because then it was also like, I have to pack my stuff and move, and where am I going to go? So it was all of those things that were truly just the buildup of this, and it ended up coming out in that way. So it was a lot of feeling overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed with so much, and um, especially when you're about to graduate and you don't know what's the next thing, what's the plan, especially because I was going to school away from home. And I was just like, I don't want to go back home. I got to figure out what to do. And then, like, when plans were not coming up, it's just like, oh, it was like one thing after another. Because school was fine, because it was just now what do I do now that this thing is being removed? And I think the other part was I was coming to the conclusion that I didn't want to pursue athletics professionally, because that was presented to me. So I was just like, all right, if I'm not going to do that professionally, what am I going to do? Because I just want to be done with sports anyways. I just rather do something else. So it was just all those things that bubbled up and had been building up for a while. And I want to say for like months, maybe even years, to where now it just came out into this instant, and it cost me my season. Thankfully, it didn't cost me a life. That I was able to, those were the other things that were impacting me at that time as well. Because it's never just one thing. It just never is. It's always something else. It's like, all right, what else is going on? And I think I now I just remember, I think about that time, my baby sister was in the hospital for meningitis. So it was all of those things that were encompassing and just literally compounding and building up and building up. So like I said, just wasn't the team stuff. It was all the life stuff for sure. Any questions? Go ahead, Sala. Sorry.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I would imagine that's kind of the same, possibly, a lot of our students can relate to that,
Yeah.
with, a lot of compounding issues going on, maybe at home, and maybe as they're, taking a two jobs or something like that on top of going to school, on top
For
of
sure.
like, and if you're a student athlete, that's like even more. There's a lot of, I would imagine, a lot of expectations like you shared in your story. So I think a lot of your experience, I know, our students can relate to that as well. Just like that compounded pressure,
Yeah.
stress on top of everything. And so like, in your story, it really, like before we even are therapists, like we didn't know any of these tools that we could help ourselves. And so if you are a student and you're kind of like can really relate and connect with Scarlett's story, just know that there's help out there,
For
and
sure.
as you can see, like just because we are therapists as well, it doesn't mean we're immune to any of these things as well. So I hope that you do, reach out and be able to get the resources and help that you need. I know Lonnie will share the resources later on, but I do have a one more question. It says,
For sure.
you mentioned enraged and blacking out. Is there a different, is that the same thing as anger? I think it's what, yeah. You mentioned enraged and blacking out. Is that the same thing as anger?
I would personally say it's not the same thing, because there's like anger, and then there's like excessive. And so that's going above that. And so because when we're blacking out and we don't know what's going on, we can't even pay attention. You're disconnected. You're disassociating right there. So it's just like, so I wouldn't say it's the same thing. I would say it's something different. Is that helpful? That's all you can add on if you want.
I like that response. Like we said throughout this whole conversation, like anger is a normal emotion that we all feel. Like just like you're feeling happy or frustrated, like these are all very normal, common emotions. I think when it comes to feeling enraged, that seems to be a much more intense, I think. A lot more intense, feeling maybe on top of that. And if I know that's what Scarlett had described her experience, so she's like went above that, to the point where she is blacking out and being able to dissociate from the present moment.
Yeah, because I would say when that was the first time, that was the first time that I remember afterwards being like, I don't even remember what happened. Because usually when I'm angry, I'm
Right.
aware, but I wasn't aware of what was going on. Because
Mhm.
like I said, the fact that I had to be convinced to go get help for myself, and I was like, nope, I'm good, I'm fine, because I didn't know what happened to my body. So there's a disassociation then, particularly for me, that happens. So that's why I would say enraged is very different than just from anger, for sure. Now, if there's a lot of unhealthy anger and it's pent up, that's how we can get to rage. That's how you can get to rage. I'm not saying that happens all the time. In my situation, that's what happened. It was a lot of unaddressed root feelings that led to anger, that led to me becoming enraged and blacking out.
Yeah. Great
Hopefully that helps.
questions.
Great question.
Yeah. Great questions. Great questions. Yep. That's it.
Good. All right. So here's how we can start sharing anger healthily, because we have to turn our decision maker back on. Again, remember, that's why it's at the front, because that's the first thing we're supposed to go to is our decision maker, and not use the back part of our brain, our emotional part. That's why it's in the back, because we have to turn this thing on first. So the first thing you can do is stop and take a break immediately. Use conscious thinking, and not letting the emotion or anger take over. In the summary, there is a copy of the feelings wheel. There is a copy of a 50 ways to take a break resources and our contact information. Another thing you can do is a guided breathing exercise. So again, and there, like I said, there's a worksheet that you can use of 50 ways to relax. So some of the things I like to do on 50 ways to take a relax, I'm a big cloud watcher. I love watching clouds, and I also fly a kite. I have my own kite. Nobody else can use it but me. So I love going to fly my kites. And if it's a good windy day and you see me in the park, then flying a kite, that's why, because it's my way to take a break, And then again, talk to a trusted adult and or friend. Remember, you want them to be emotionally safe. Go to the people who are emotionally safe first, not the ones who you think are going to be emotionally safe. It's like people you have identified and are secure that these are emotionally safe people. Next is use a feelings wheel. Yes, again, a feelings wheel is a part of the resources that we have provided. Again, identify your surface, middle, and root feelings, and share again with an emotionally safe and trusted person. Everybody's not emotionally safe. I just want to continue to say that. And sometimes, just to be clear, our family or whoever it is in our family is not emotionally safe. And that's okay. You got to find the ones who are. And then lastly is, I'm big on journaling. Journal your feelings, write them down, use a video blog, use art, whatever medium that you want to use, is that you have to give yourself a space to release what's going on within you. That's one of the ways that we can release it, especially if you're still getting comfortable with talking about what's going on with you. That is one of the ways, the easiest ways that you can use. So if you don't have an actual journal you want to write in, you can use your phone. Yeah, we all carry our phones, or just a random pen and paper that you may have in your folders or just in your office. But I always want to encourage to use that medium, to use journaling. And again, journaling does not mean you have to write a passage. It could be whatever you want it to be. It could be scribbles, it can be a list, it could just be things that you're feeling. It doesn't have to be a passage like paragraph after paragraph. You get to decide what you want to do and give yourself permission to do what you want to do when it comes to journaling. So again, reason why I say video blog is because some clients just like to video blog, like video journal themselves, and that's okay. It's whatever you feel is comfortable. These are just some examples. And again, use art, like however you want to use art to express what's going on with you. So again, some tips to start sharing anger healthily: stop and take a break, use the feelings wheel, identify your emotionally safe person, and journal your feelings. Any questions, any comments? I'm not sure. Shala, do we have time to do the guided breathing exercise?
No, we're at 126.
Okay, cool. So if we had time, we would have did a guided breathing exercise. And so one of the things, and you can actually catch it. I have a newsletter that goes out. So if you want a copy of that, you just have to subscribe to the newsletter. That's where a copy of that is. But I wanted to, the reason why I wanted to do that was because I'm going to stop sharing my screen because that is our conclusion of the presentation. Was because the significance of the impact of just taking time for yourself. It like the breathing exercise that we do, the guided one, it's just 5 minutes and 5 minutes only. So one of the things I always tell my clients when it comes to taking care of yourself is, I don't care how long your self-care activity is, just don't let it be 0 minutes. It could be 5 minutes a day, 1 minute in the morning, 2 minutes in the afternoon, 2 minutes in the evening, whatever you want it to be for you, just don't let it be 0. So that's what I want to encourage you to do. So, but again, that concludes our today's community conversation. Again, if you have any questions, please, again, utilize us while we are here, because we are licensed therapists. We have been have a combined experience of 20 years. And we want you to take advantage of utilizing this space to ask us questions, because oftentimes you don't get this information unless you're paying to see somebody like Sala at a paid event, or you're seeing a therapist. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Please send your questions as needed, because again, we will answer them. So hopefully everyone walked away with something today. And so I want to thank you again and thank our sponsors for putting on this event and just giving Sala and I this space to continue to have these community conversations, because again, we just find it important and imperative because we know our community needs these types of conversations. And so this is why we like to remove the veil of who we are and share our experiences, because again, we're not, like Sala said, we're not immune to anything. So Sala, any last words before I turn it over to Lay? Awesome.
You're good.
Awesome. So Lay, floor is yours. And one thing, bring one person the next time and then share this with one person. Okay. That's all I have. So thank you, Lay, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Scarlett and Sala, for just another great community conversation. Thank you to everyone for tuning in for today's session. What's underneath your anger? Really, just prophesy to Lava, to Scarlett and Sala for always holding it down, just sharing the knowledge and just bringing more enlightenment to our community. So I dropped in the chat our survey. Please, if for folks who attended, please complete the survey. It just helps give us feedback on how we can improve, topics that we can think about in the future. I also dropped a link to visit Scarlett and Sala. So if you want to connect with them, you're looking for a therapist, you already know who to reach out to. For the King County Pacific Islander Task Force, Celi's here online with us. So if you want to know more about what's happening with King County and how they're supporting our PI community, feel free to visit that link. And then again, you can tune into the Voice of the South Pacific by following their Facebook and just connecting with them, who are also broadcasting for us today. So thank you so much. Join us again next week from 12 to 1:30, and we'll be talking about what's your boundary.
2
So
weeks
for
from
folks,
now, Lay.
2 weeks from
2
now.
weeks from
2 weeks from now. Well, tune in next week to hear about next week's topic. And bring your friends with you too. And thank you again just to our sponsors. So thank you so much, everyone. Wishing you just a great Thursday and enjoy your weekend. Bye.
About me, or the shoulder you used to cry on. Do you ever think about love, or the bed